After having watched the initial announcement of Dawntrail in one of Final Fantasy XIV's regular live letter from a producer broadcasts, this reviewer deliberately avoided any other information about this latest expansion before playing it. This was not only to attempt to approach the experience as objectively as possible, but in addition because this player didn't want to spoil the experience of the new adventures that awaited him in the new land of Tural, the new world, a new continent on Etheirys, the fictional planet setting where Final Fantasy XIV is initially set. Yet, as he embarked on his fourth release expansion, having been consistently playing since the days of Heaven's Ward, this player had some assumptions about this latest continuation of the adventures of our Warrior of Light. Firstly, that it would have a much lighter tone than the previous two expansions, namely Shadowbringers and Endwalker, with a fair amount of humour and frivolity. After all, from what he had seen in the initial trailer, the new land of Tural was colourful and vibrant, with a distinctly Latin American flair. Secondly, that although there would be some dramatic moments, that they would not be as high stakes as saving a planet or indeed the universe. Would these assumptions then hold any weight? Dawntrail is an ambitious expansion, even by the standards of Final Fantasy XIV's already incredible heritage. This player took a week, playing at least 8 hours a day to get through the main story. Although not as large as Final Fantasy VII's Rebirth, the amount of varied content provided here is staggering. Dawntrail introduces a variety of new semi-open world environments that provide the backdrop for not only the continuation of the main story, but a slew of interesting side quests, a great deal of which give the player further insight into the new lands and culture of Tural. Of course, every expansion has introduced new locations, expanding the world and worlds for the player to be able to roam around. What makes this expansion distinctly different is the graphical improvements that have been made to the game with the release of Dawntrail, known as Patch 7.0. The graphical update that accompanies the expansion comprises of lots of relatively small changes that, when combined into the overall tapestry of what already exists, elevates the visual experience greatly. Although this is already apparent to a player from looking at his character model and exploring the new main city of Tural, it becomes much more vivid when they start exploring the locations outside of the city. Dawntrail contains some of the most impressive environments that players will have seen in Final Fantasy XIV, stacked full of meshes, vivid colour, lighting, shading and particle effects, and wonderful environmental ideas. And as in the experience of Endwalker, with each new environment this player kept saying, "Oh, this is definitely my favourite." In terms of gameplay mechanics, the designers have wisely kept the playstyle of player characters largely as it was in Endwalker, where changes were already implemented to many jobs. Jobs are the evolution of starting classes in Final Fantasy XIV. As players can now progress to level 100, the new abilities that accompany the progression are spectacular and fun, but more importantly are incorporated into what already exists. In other words, players aren't going to be struggling to find new buttons on their controller or keyboard and ways of configuring the new abilities. Tying into this is that the core foundational concepts of how players acquire higher level equipment and weapons, by earning tokens by completing certain daily duties, also remains the same. The only thing that has changed in that regard is the name of the tokens, and that the old tokens are no longer available. As with previous expansions, even higher level equipment and weapons will be introduced slowly over the expansion. This keeps the content at the right level of difficulty for as long as is reasonable, as well as giving more involved players the opportunity to outfit all the job roles that currently exist. Remember, in Final Fantasy XIV, one character can be every single class, job, and every single trade. In regard to crafting, again, the same underlying structures exist. In the view of this reviewer and player, This is exactly how it should be. Final Fantasy XIV is primarily a story-led MMO. All players have to go through a learning period with any game, and with an MMO this can take a while. Once that is done though, it becomes the foundation that everything else for the player can be built upon. Innovation in Final Fantasy XIV comes from the stories and ideas that the developers consistently surprise us with. For example, giving us a whole island in Endwalker or the Bosnian Southern Front in Shadowbringers. To not have this would be like playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and halfway suddenly being confronted with a completely different control scheme and inventory system. So now to the story and see whether or not the assumptions above had any credibility. The story is a two-sided epic tale. It is both yin and yang if you like, with the first half being distinctly leaning into yin and the second half leaning into the yang, with both having an element of each other within them. The first half is distinctly for the most part light in tone and filled with humour. As this player is an increasingly aging alpha male, he did find some of the dialogue and more dramatic moments in the first half to be a little corny, perhaps too idealistic. Some moments were distinctly very feminine. This isn't, though, a bad thing, and the message being conveyed is undoubtedly a universally appealing one. After all, this is Final Fantasy. Hammy over-the-top lines of dialogue are not only expected, but demanded. The second half though, oh my word, it is suffice to say that you haven't seen anything yet. Just for an example, after the final raid of the game, a raid in which that particular group of Warriors of Light had wiped 5 times, every single player took the time to say how much fun it had been. All of the main story-based dungeons and raids have wonderful new combat mechanics and variations of existing mechanics that will challenge players more so than in any previous expansion, but they are all fun. As ever, you can enter the vast majority of these with your favourite NPCs from the game or go in with a party or group up with others using the duty finder. Masayoshi Soken once again delivers a wondrous tapestry of thematic ideas that weave together new Latin American inspired ideas with tributes to themes from previous Final Fantasy games, utilising a slew of varied instruments, orchestration, choir, rock and synth to ensure an effortless vibrancy and originality that shines on the whole experience. Yoshi P and the whole team at Square Enix Creative Business Unit 3 have done it once again, delivering an expansion that not only remains faithful to Final Fantasy XIV's growing heritage, but confidently strides forward into a bright and wonderful new chapter in the ongoing saga of the Warriors of Light. Utter brilliance.